today's ill. I'm laughing because today's ill is obviously what's going on, but we'll put that aside as much as we can right now. Whether it's because I thought of Shavuot and one of the pieces that I love most about Shavuot, Megillat Ruth, or that I was thinking of this ill, but appropriately, let's talk about Megillat Ruth. The ill is the tendency very often for people to stay stuck in a rut, stagnating, and ignoring opportunities to change your situation instead of being adventurous. Now, there can be times that it's a rut. If you use that word rut, it must be something negative. But there are even times, let's say, that a person is just used to doing something and lets that be the way of life forever. And part of that is, psychologists tell us, is that for many, decision-making is very difficult. And it leads, unfortunately, to many missed opportunities. Now, I'll give you half a moment to think about that. Have there been any missed opportunities in your life because you couldn't get yourself to move? I've called this next few sessions change and renewal, and it doesn't matter how old we are. It can be on different levels, obviously. So keep that in the back of your head or in the front. I believe that Shavuot, and specifically the book of Ruth, speaks to this issue. Now that might surprise you. But before we look into that, I want to talk about something that we've talked in various ways about before, about the essence of our holidays. I'm going to share. Okay, so in general, I feel the need to bring it home again, how vitally important breaks in time are from our everyday experiences. Now, to that end, thank God we have Shabbat every week. And sometimes people feel, well, that makes it less important. No. But let's talk about a holiday that we have once a year. So Rav Adin Steinsaltz, who we lost this year, says the following in text number 1. The word Shana, Shin Nun He, contains within it 2 meanings that at first glance appears almost contradictory. On the one hand, a Shana denotes something that repeats itself, like Mishnah Torah is a repetition of the Torah. And that's in fact what Sefer Dvarim, Deuteronomy, is called, because it repeats much of what's happened already in the Torah. So on the one hand, a Shana denotes something that repeats itself again and again. And in fact, we have year after year. It appears to be a fixed cycle of recurring patterns, day and night, summer and winter. On the other hand, a Shana also denotes change. Lishanot, to change something. New realities and new experiences, changes relative to the past. So let's keep that in mind, that it's repetition but it's also change. That's similar to the Shorish Kadesh, Kuf Dalid Shin, that can also mean holy. It can also mean a prostitute from the same Shorish. There's something significant about that. He goes on to say, our festivals and holidays, remembrance days, and special occasions in
What's the matter?
lacking meaningful points of distinction, like mud into which we sink, unable to extricate ourselves.
I'm losing. Why would I have that problem?
No, we're all having it.
We all lost. We lost her.
All of us? Oh, so it's not my computer.
No, it's everybody. Bracha's off.
It's
We seem
everybody.
to lose Bracha.
Yeah.
Hear each other. It's Israel. I don't know if we can hear Nahama.
There it is, back on.
I'm trying to call her. No, it was just Bracha, not me. It's not Israel.
Good.
Israel.
This is not Israel, this problem. Yeah, we lost you, Bracha.
A long
Okay.
time ago.
Here she is.
Okay.
Your sound is off, Bracha.
Everyone else should mute.
Everybody should mute.
Do you hear me?
Yes.
Now we
Okay.
can-
Who needed that much more anxiety today?
That's for sure.
Okay. Okay. These special days are the landmarks, signposts, and lights along the way. While they are part of the annual cycle, meaning we celebrate these days every year, but they are also openings through which we may emerge from the stagnancy and rut of life's routines. They provide us with opportunities not only to celebrate and mourn, but also to renew and change ourselves. It's fascinating that in order to make sure we don't get caught up with routine, we do something routinely every year. And that every year seems to come as we get older, quicker and quicker. So there's something very significant about that. And it's coming back to what we said last week about us bringing together. There's always a mixture of whether it's joy and sadness, difficulty, lightness. And here this comes through as well. So Shavuot, just like any other holiday, is a time for us to reflect. Now, I know that you would usually assume that if I'm talking about change and renewal, it would mean that we're approaching Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. No, not yet. First of all, to be honest, every day is an opportunity. Even if you look at the Amidah every day, that we say Slachna, forgive us every day, or return us every day. We don't just put it off for once a year. Now, what I have come to give a lot of thought to is the following. Look at this beautiful colored chart. It's not just the holiday itself, but it's also the order and the juxtaposition of holidays, I believe, that have a lot of meaning. So we begin And this is considered quite a heavy, intense time from Pesach to Shavuot. So we begin with Pesach, and that symbolizes freedom from external authority. We don't have the Egyptians on our backs anymore. Then we can say Yom HaShoah is similar to that experience that we are still not independent. Yom HaZikaron L'Chalalei Tzahal, for fallen soldiers, is the struggle towards the independence, and Yom HaAtzmaut is the beginning of the achievement of that independence. Lag BaOmer, I'm more concerned about the Omer, the counting between Pesach and Shavuot, that it shows going from Pesach to Shavuot is a process. And that's why I consider the counting every night very significant, because we are saying we are part of a process. Yom Yerushalayim, that makes us realize that while we are on this process, looking to reach Shavuot, which is very lofty, we are also on the ground. And hence, Yom Yerushalayim, we think of Jerusalem Lamata, earthly Jerusalem, and Yerushalayim Shel Mala. And we combine those. Yehuda Amichai says it beautifully, how just as holy as Yerushalayim Shel Mala is day-to-day life in Jerusalem. And I would imagine you've heard this before, but I'll share it with you again. He says, once I sat on the steps by a gate at David's tower. I placed my 2 heavy baskets at my side. A group of tourists was standing around their guide, and I became their target marker. You see that man with the baskets? Just right of his head, there's an arch from the Roman period. Just right of his head. But he's moving, I said to myself. Redemption will come only if their guide tells them. You see that arch from the Roman period? It's not important, but next to it, left and down a bit, there sits a man who bought fruit and vegetables for his family today. The juxtaposition of the Kotel and the Old City with modern Jerusalem says it all, says it all. Now, Shavuot. Somebody tell us what Shavuot is all about. And you can say it in a couple of words. What words come to mind immediately? Unmute yourself if you want to speak, please.
The giving of the Torah to the Jewish people.
Okay, thank you, Michael. Can somebody say what that Torah is? If you had to explain to somebody what Torah is, what would you say?
The framework of Jewish life.
Okay, what is that framework? What else? Can we be a little more specific? What you both said, absolutely true.
How people should treat one another, to treat one another with dignity and respect.
Okay, I think, Bev, you've gone from Michael and Marlene being a bit general to you being very specific. What goes in between there, somebody?
God's way of communicating with the Jewish people.
You people don't know how to just give a simple answer.
Commandments.
What are
Answer-
they?
The answer is the 10 Commandments.
Okay, that's the closest. I think Sarah just said that. Laws.
Yes.
Okay, we think, yes, you agree. Okay. So note that we call Shavuot, has a few names, but Shavuot, by the way, is weeks, the 7 weeks, the counting from Pesach to Shavuot. But one of the names is Zman Matan Torah, the time of the giving of the Torah. And in the context of things that we've said over the last couple of months, that should be clear. Why? God gave it and we receive it every day and in different ways. Okay, now, when you hear that we're being given a book of laws, now there are other things in the Torah, history, stories, but when you hear that you're being given laws, one of your first thoughts might be, well, that means that we are submitting our, giving up our autonomy. And if we left Egypt wanting to be free from external authority, why is the culmination at Mount Sinai, Shavuot, receiving laws? Well, what's the difference between having had the experience in Egypt and accepting these laws? It's a different type of freedom when you accept laws. What type of freedom is that? Anyone?
Choice.
Choice, okay.
Along with the laws, you also get rights. There's a balance between what you can, what your given rights are, and your responsibilities that go hand in hand with those rights.
Yafeh, okay. You're also free when you feel that you've accepted and feel obligated to those laws. You're freeing yourself from what Adin Steinsaltz calls selfish impulses. That you're not just thinking of yourself. The example that Bev gave in respecting another person and his or her dignity. So it is only a free person that can say no to certain impulses that you have, and makes us different from those with animal instincts. Okay, now what this leads me up to asking is, why is Megillat Ruth the Megillah that is connected with the holiday where we are celebrating the giving of a book of laws? Anyone? I'll repeat that. Why do we read Megillat Ruth? What is it in Megillat Ruth that is cause for it to be the Megillah that we read on Shavuot, where we celebrate the Torah, a book of laws?
Could it be because Ruth's enormous leap of faith and acceptance from left field, her sister-in-law chose not to come, and she makes this enormous change and loyalty and acceptance.
Very good, Helen. Okay, I like that phrase, the leap of faith. Anybody else?
Yes, she's a convert, and that means that she chose
Absolutely.
the religion,
Okay.
as opposed to being just born into it and accepting it without much thought.
Thank you, Margot. Choice and a lot of thought. Okay. Interesting.
Also, Bracha, the outcome of the story in the book of Ruth is really predicated on laws that are already in the Torah. The whole situation with Boaz is really spelled out in Torah law.
Yes, about how to leave fruit, vegetables, etc., produce in your fields. Interesting. So it certainly has part of the Torah in it. Interesting that nobody has said what I used to consider the key reason that it was essential, or there was a point being made in why we read Megillat Ruth. There's a phrase in our tradition, lifnim mishurat hadin, beyond the letter of the law. And that often is equated with another term that you do know, chesed, acts of kindness. And very often when people think of Ruth and Boaz, they think of the fact that she is considered a model of a convert, but also how compassionate she was. When was the last time you heard of a daughter-in-law choosing to be with her mother-in-law, especially when the husband, the son, isn't even around anymore? So the fact that Ruth, that was supposed to get a chuckle, that Ruth decides to be with Naomi, that's considered to be way beyond what she had to do. She did not have to be with her. Now, I want to be sure, so that I always thought that the fact that we have a case here of Ruth going beyond the letter of law, and we read that on a day where we're saying how important laws are, I always found that to mean that we're making a statement that it's not enough to just follow the law, but we are meant, as Margot said, to make choices. Helen said to take leaps, to make changes, and to look at a particular situation. Now, in text number 2, Rav Zera said in the Midrash, this scroll of Ruth tells us nothing either of cleanliness or of uncleanliness, either of prohibition or permission. So if it's not laws that it's dealing with, for what purpose then was it written, he asks? To teach how great is the reward of those who do deeds of kindness. So is that the reason we read it? Or is it perhaps what Mika Bal of the Netherlands, somebody who teaches and delves into literature, modern and biblical. And she makes this point. The point of the Megillah is not chesed, the typical female virtue, but chutzpah, willingness to challenge or better stretch inadequate social legal norms in the direction of greater justice and give more voice to the deprived. The highest virtue is high-minded, transgressive action designed to further growth, not to undermine the system. Now, what is she talking about here? What transgression did Ruth do? So let's look a little at Megillat Ruth. So I'll fill in some blanks in case there is anyone that perhaps isn't fully aware of what Megillat Ruth is. And it came to pass in the days when the judges judged, so there wasn't too much order, that there was a famine in the land. And a certain man of Beit Lechem in Judah went to sojourn in the field of Moab, he and his wife and his 2 sons. Now, if we were to look at the Hebrew, a certain man in the Hebrew would be Ish. And Ish in the Tanakh doesn't just mean a male, but it means somebody who's important in society. So why is that significant here? Elimelech was an important person, some say the mayor of town. And when there's a famine, what does he decide to do? To take his wife, Naomi, and 2 sons, Machlon and Chilion, and to leave them and go to Moab. Now, what do we glean about Elimelech for having done that? What do you think of what he's done?
Elimelech is it's full of self-interest, and he abandons his leadership role with the people, and then goes to Moab, which is really a huge transgression on his part.
Okay, you think of the mayor of your city, the premier of your province. If something's going on and they decide to pick up and leave during a difficult time, that's not the time to do it. I'm looking at somebody who I have a feeling is saying, I wish they would, but
No, it
that's
happened.
not-
It happened.
What?
It happened a few times.
It happened.
okay?
It happened a few times this time around. The
And what did you think?
politicians.
Oh, it was cabinet ministers who went on vacation.
All right. Okay. Well, there you have it. All right. Now, you could say if somebody, just a regular citizen, leaves, they're concerned about their family, you can't judge. But here, as soon as somebody takes on public responsibility, then that certainly is not the time to be leaving. They do. And not only do they leave, but they go to Moab. Now, Moab is one of the few places that absolutely the Israelites were not to form relationships with the people there. For a very simple reason, they didn't know how to treat people. They didn't treat the Israelites properly when they were on their way through the desert. We won't go into that now. And they go. What happens when they get there? Very simply, we know that the 2 sons marry. Ruth and her sister Orpah, but very quickly, Elimelech and the 2 sons die. Now, we don't have to say, was it because he had sinned? Some think that was, and there's a message to be given in there, but that's the situation. Now, we then, just in case there is somebody who's not aware, we have a situation. Naomi is bitter and in fact wants her name to be changed to Mara, like Maror. And she's impoverished. She wallows in feeling sorry for herself, but something gives her a feeling that she wants to go back to Beit Lechem. And she quickly tells her daughters-in-law, you don't have to come with me. I don't have any more sons to give you. Stay here. And we know that Orpah, as Helen reminded us, decides to stay and nobody can judge her. That would have been the most logical thing to do. But Ruth says the following in text 5, entreat me not to leave thee and to return from following after thee. For whither thou goest, I will go. And where thou lodgest, I will lodge. Thy people shall be my people. And thy God, my God, where thou diest, I will die. That is such a famous text. What is she committing herself to there? People? I'm asking for a very specific reason.
She's
That is
committing
youth.
herself to Judaism and to her mother-in-law and to be with her forever.
Okay. Thank you. Where do you get that she's committing herself to Judaism?
Your people will be my people.
People will be my people.
You know
And
what? That's
will be my
fascinating that you just said. I'm so happy that you said that as a reflection of her commitment to Judaism, rather than saying, your God will be my God. Now, I'm only raising this because, in fact, even though she's considered a model of convert in that she accepts Naomi's faith, some people today are not sure whether she really was accepting God because she was interested in this God, or it was just one of the other things that showed her commitment to Naomi. But it almost doesn't matter for what I'm talking about. Look at what Ruth is doing here. Exactly what Helen said. It is a leap. Her leaving in a similar way that Abraham left his home. She's going with somebody who's impoverished. She doesn't know what's going to be when they get back to Beit Lechem. She probably knows what Israelites have been told about Moabites, but she's willing to pick up and go. That takes something to make that kind of change. Anybody want to talk to that?
Okay.
Okay, let's go on. She goes, and it so happens, as Marlene alluded to, that a wonderful tradition that our Israelite society had is that there were all types of laws of when you owned a farm, a vineyard, you were meant to leave some in various ways for the impoverished. And the poor knew that at a certain time they could come and get what was left in the corners, what was forgotten, what had fallen. And so that made it promising for somebody who was in need. And Ruth goes because she has to bring back for herself and for Naomi. And when she's there, she meets Boaz, who is very nice to her. And then Ruth comes back and tells Naomi that she met him. And Naomi begins to start thinking, this Naomi, who was so bitter and ready to give up almost in Moab, not only does she come back to Beit Lechem, but she starts to rejuvenate. And she comes up with a plan. And not selfishly, she's thinking about the future of Ruth and her legacy. And that's not selfish. So part of this plan, we all know, entails Ruth doing something that I'm not sure every lass would have done, certainly not in those times. Now, and when Boaz in text 6 had eaten and drunk, and his heart was merry, he went to lie down at the end of the heap of corn. And she came softly and uncovered his feet and laid her down. Now, before I go on, what is the purpose for which she has gone? Why does Naomi want Ruth to seduce Boaz? What other custom was alive and well in those times?
It's to leave an heir, to have an heir, because otherwise that whole dynasty is finished.
Okay, yes. Now,
But Boaz was the kinsman, and
Yes.
that was who she had to seek out.
okay, now, that's part of it as well, in that there was accepted that if your husband dies, the brother should, and if not, another kinsman. Okay, so Naomi feels that Boaz would be the closest for this, even though in fact he was not. But okay, so all she really wanted was for them to have a child. And that's what she tells Ruth. I don't have it all here. Okay. And it came to pass at midnight that the man was startled and turned himself, and behold, a woman lay at his feet. And he said, "Who art thou?" And she answered, "I am Ruth, thine handmaid. Spread therefore thy skirt over thy handmaid, for thou art a near kinsman." Now, what is she telling him when she says, "Spread your skirt over me"?
She's
Is that a request for protection?
Now, what would protection be exactly? She is not, no. She is now not doing exactly what Naomi told her to do.
Right.
Why? What did Naomi tell her would happen when she went there? Naomi said, "You're going to go there and he's going to see you. And as most men would do, he would be delighted and he would then take it from there." Well, Boaz doesn't take it from there. Not only that, when she uses that expression, she is asking, when you say protection, she doesn't want simply intercourse, she wants marriage.
She wants a child.
That's much of my point, that she's looking for him to envelop her in some safety. And that's
exactly. Okay. Now, to fit in with our theme, that it should be clear, Naomi made the change coming back, Ruth makes the change, and Ruth now also is not, because some people look at Ruth here and feel that when she says, "I'm going to do whatever you say, Naomi," and it's clear when you read the entire text that there's some self-effacement here. But rather than look at it that way, Ruth is showing autonomy and that she's going beyond what Naomi told her to do. And she's certainly not waiting for Boaz to make the first move, but she says, "Do such and such." We continue. And he said, "Blessed be thou of the Lord, my daughter. Thou hast shown more kindness in the end than at the beginning, inasmuch as you did not follow the young men, whether poor or rich." Meaning he's very, like in Elam's, shocked that she's choosing him. "And now, my daughter, fear not. I will do to thee all that thou sayest, for all the men in the gate of my people do know thou art a virtuous woman." So he's not doing anything. He's just talking. "And now," he goes on, "it is true that I am a near kinsman. Howbeit there is a kinsman nearer than I. Tarry this night, and it shall be in the morning, that if he will perform unto you the part of a kinsman, well, let him do the kinsman part. But if he be not willing to do the part of a kinsman to thee, then will I do the part of a kinsman to thee. As the Lord liveth, lie down until the morning." Now, what do we learn about Boaz in that and in that last line?
It's very honorable.
Very honorable.
He's willing to,
Absolutely.
The first thing that's interesting is he's obviously checked her out too. He's asked around, he knows who she is, and he's obviously interested, and he understands what is happening here.
But
But he's nervous about it. He's a lot older.
Okay.
He-
Anybody else?
He also knows the laws. He's a learned person, and he doesn't want to do something outside of the law. He wants to be able to follow the law, and he also respects Ruth for her virtue.
Okay, let's put all that together. Now, which law are you talking about, Marlene, that he's aware of?
I think it's called Uban, the law of the kinsman.
Yivum, okay. Any other law that she's aware of? I mentioned it earlier. All right, I'm not testing you, but this is a very important point. When he says to her, and the rabbis look at this as proof that he was, as Simone said, very honorable, he tells her to lie down until the morning, and he means that literally.
Yeah,
Not
he's
with it. All right, so that he is being honorable, and he is not going to be with this woman who he's not married to. So that's one law. Not only that, she is aware also that if people know that something's going on here, she's willing to put her reputation at stake. But it shows she is not self-effacing, but she is willing to act. Now,
Okay, all right.
Okay, now, I want to ask you, we said earlier that Elimelech was maybe punished.
All right, everything okay? You got everything? Yes. Okay, so I'll see you next Tuesday then, right?
Okay,
Your door. Okay, I'll lock it, it's okay.
please mute. So Elimelech, we said some think that he died and his sons died because they sinned. And what would that sin be? Not just that they left, the sons certainly not, that they left Beit Lechem and his responsibility, but Elimelech introduced his sons to the Moabite girls. And as I said, because the Moabites were as they were, that was one people that they were told not to be with. So here, Boaz is doing the same thing, is he not? He is agreeing that ultimately he will be with this Moabite. But what's the difference? What's the difference?
She's converted.
She is, whereas Elimelech has done something, taken his sons away from the Israelite people, Boaz is bringing in somebody to our people. But in the meantime, Ruth is not just going beyond the letter of the law, and Boaz isn't just being very kind by saying he will, even though he's not the closest. They're almost transgressing the law. Now, that makes the fact that we read this book on the holiday of law, even that much more fascinating to me. But not if you think the way we've been thinking over these last months, that when we're looking at laws, we need that fixed order, but we also need to be able to look at a certain event, and maybe it's a one-time event in the current moment, and decide what is the right thing to do, and trust. And Stan might ask, are we putting God second? But we're doing God's will. To really understand God's gift of the Torah that we are being given on Sunday night and Monday, and you also continue on Tuesday, to really understand it in its fullness and to understand the message God is giving us is to understand that he wants us to see the big picture. And when you make a covenant, and that's what we do next week with God, it's as equal partners. That doesn't mean I have powers that God has. But what it means is, as somebody said earlier, I get to choose, but more importantly, to think and to understand the wider picture. Now, why was this such a great thing for Boaz to do? As the Midrash says, and this takes us back to what I said about when we accept laws, we are able to free ourselves from, I'll say, selfish urges. And this just points to Boaz. Rabbi Yossi said, there were 3 in our history whose evil inclination threatened to overtake them, and each of them responded to it with an oath. They are Joseph, David, and Boaz. Joseph, as it says, when he was being seduced by Potiphar, how can I do this most wicked thing and sin before God? He swore to his evil inclination and said, by God, I will not sin. Boaz, from where do we know? For it says, as the Lord lives, lie down until morning. Rabbi Yehuda says, that entire night, his evil inclination worked against him, saying, you are single and seek a wife. She is single and seeks a husband. Arise and sleep with her, and she will be your wife. He swore to his evil inclination, as said, as the Lord lives, I will not touch her. That is a free person, not giving in those surroundings. Now, one more thing about the giving of the Torah. The scene at Mount Sinai is the following. In 8a, and it came to pass on the 3rd day, while they've been preparing themselves for this event, when it was morning, that there were thunders and lightnings and a thick cloud upon the mount, and the voice of a horn exceeding loud, and all the people that were in the camp trembled, just because it was so amazing. What would you expect would be the next topic in the Torah after this very lofty, heavenly, spiritual experience? What would it be followed by? What would you think?
Joy and rejoicing, yeah.
Sorry?
Celebration?
A celebration. You would think that. They might get up and dance just as they did when they crossed the sea. Anybody else?
Gratitude.
Gratitude. Well, let's look and see. So that's the giving of the Torah is in Parshat Yitro. The next Parsha is Parshat Mishpatim. And Mishpatim, you know, Mishpat can mean a court case, a sentence. It also means laws that we understand the reasons why we have them. That is the very next Parsha, and it begins this way. And these are the laws which you shall set before them. If you buy a servant, if a person hits another, he that curses his parent, what does it do? Not dance, not celebrate, but it goes in to the very mundane. Now, what's the message that's being given there? First of all, I told you, if you look at 8b, and these are the laws. I might be here couple of years already, but I know that that's bad English. And these are the laws. And in the Hebrew, it says, Ve'ela mishpatim. Why begin a new chapter, let alone a new sentence, with the word and? There's a point that's being made there, that just as the ritualistic and lofty laws of Parshat Yitro and sacrifices, the laws now between people, Ben Adam L'Chavero, these were also given on Har Sinai, and these are just as important. But what's important, if I talked earlier about juxtaposition, that you have the lofty, and wouldn't we love to remain in the lofty forever? Similar to the Thursday night party last week. But then you get back down to reality, and you must go back into the mundane. But then, how does that same chapter, Mishpatim, end? And they saw the God of Israel, and there was under his feet, looking like a paved work of sapphire stone, and the like of the very heaven for clearness. We start on the lofty, we go to the mundane, and we return. This is a repeated cycle in our lives. And our holidays, not just Shavuot, remind us of this. Remind us of this. And Rav Steinsaltz says this. In our lives, the most profound and uplifting things are found precisely in the mundane details of the daily routine. Now that's a challenge, but we have to face routine and the mundane, and they're with us more than the holidays. So it's up to us to combine them, not just wait for that lofty. And I'm sounding very preachy now, but that's my message for this Shavuot.